Chapter 1: The Unseen Hand. The hum was almost imperceptible, a low thrumming that vibrated not in Alex's ears, but deep within his bones. It started subtly, a background note to his already anxiety-ridden existence. He'd first noticed it a few months ago, a persistent feeling of unease, like a phantom limb twitching. He'd dismissed it as stress, the pressure of his demanding job as a software developer, the ever-present weight of his crumbling personal life. His wife, Sarah, had left him 6 months prior. Unable to cope with his increasing paranoia, his late-night research binges, his whispered conversations with people he'd met online, people who spoke of things that sounded insane, but the hum persisted, growing stronger, morphing into something more sinister. It was accompanied by the whispers. At first, they were indistinct, like the murmur of a crowd, a background drone of voices he couldn't quite decipher. He'd try to focus, strain his ears, but they always remained just out of reach, teasing him with snippets of conversation, fragments of sentences that seemed to mock him. One evening, while working late at the office, the whispers became clearer. "He's getting close," one voice hissed, the sound sharp and metallic, like a rusty hinge. Alex froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He looked around the empty office, his heart pounding in his chest. "Who's getting close?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Silence, then another voice, colder, more calculating. "He's starting to suspect." Alex slammed his laptop shut, his hands shaking. He knew he wasn't imagining things. He wasn't losing his mind. He was being watched. He was being targeted. He stumbled out of the office, the city lights blurring through his tear-filled eyes. He walked for hours, the hum and the whispers following him like shadows. He ended up at the park where he and Sarah used to walk their dog, a small, scruffy terrier named Winston. Winston had died a year ago, another casualty of Sarah's departure. Alex sat on their favorite bench, the cold night air biting at his skin. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he typed, hearing voices, feeling watched, mind control. The search results were a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, government experiments, and fringe websites. He scrolled through the pages, his anxiety mounting. Then he found it, a forum dedicated to targeted individuals, or TIs. He clicked on the link, his breath catching in his throat. The stories were eerily familiar, people describing the same experiences he was having. The hum, the whispers, the feeling of being monitored, manipulated, controlled. They talked about synthetic telepathy, directed energy weapons, mind control technology. They talked about the ATG, the Ancestral Task Group. The ATG. It was a name that kept appearing in the TI forums, a shadowy organization, whispered about in hushed tones. Some believed it was a remnant of Cold War-era mind control projects. Others that it was a private corporation. Still others that it was a global cabal, pulling the strings of governments and corporations. Alex spent the rest of the night reading through the forum, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to a chilling sense of dread. These people weren't crazy. They were experiencing the same things he was. They were being targeted. He found a thread discussing the early signs of targeting. One user described a persistent humming sensation, another mentioned intrusive thoughts that weren't their own. Someone else talked about feeling like they were being watched, even when they were alone. Alex ticked off the boxes in his mind. Humming? Check. Intrusive thoughts? Double check. Feeling watched? Absolutely. He started to research the history of mind control, the CIA's MK-Ultra project, the Soviet Union's research into psychotronics. He discovered patents for devices that could transmit sound directly into the skull, articles on the potential of electromagnetic fields to influence brain activity. The more he learned, the more convinced he became. He wasn't crazy. He was a victim. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. Alex was still sitting on the bench, his mind reeling. He knew he couldn't go back to his old life. He couldn't ignore what he was experiencing. He was a targeted individual, and he had to find out why. This expanded version of Chapter 1 provides more detail about Alex's experiences, introduces the concept of the ATG, and hints at the larger conspiracy. It also incorporates more sensory details and emotional depth, making Alex's story more compelling. This is just a small example of how you could expand each chapter. To reach 100,000 words, you would need to develop each chapter to a similar level of detail, adding subplots, introducing more characters, and further exploring the world of the targeted individual. This would be a significant undertaking, but hopefully this example gives you a starting point.